I would say property sourcing is the best way to get into property. The reason being is because it gives you the foundational skills to be able to do your own stuff eventually in property. For example, stacking deals or understanding areas, what strategies perform the best, how to deal with agents, how to deal with investors, how to deal with sellers if you're going direct to vendor. If you go on these courses, you're kind of just taught to find a deal, stack it up in a deal stacking calculator, post it in a Facebook group and kind of hope that it sells. It's not a scalable business. Number one, you obviously need to be educated on what you're selling, know your product before you even speak to any clients, because you don't want to get on the phone and start mumbling your words. Don't call yourself a property sourcer. One of the main reasons for this is because
mark your calendars. The 2025 Property Developer Show is coming to 5 major cities across the UK, bringing the best service providers and developers together under one roof. On the 5th of March, we kick off in the first show at Milton Keynes, followed by Bristol on the 30th of April, Birmingham on the 16th of July, and then we're heading north to Manchester on the 10th of September, followed by our final stop in Newcastle upon Tyne on the 15th of October. Don't miss out on connecting with other developers, service providers, and industry leaders. Visit propertydevelopershow.co.uk to book your free ticket today. Welcome to another episode of the Property Developer Show, the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jordan Smethurst, who has an investment agency as well as investing himself, and the Property Club, which is a club for mostly young investors, but it's open to pretty much everyone, I guess.
Yeah,
welcome to the show today.
Welcome. Cheers.
Pleasure. So in terms of like the investment agency, where did you sort of start with that? Because obviously you invest in yourself.
Yeah.
And obviously then I'm assuming, did the invest in yourself lead into the investment agency, or was it the sort of other way around?
I suppose it was the other way around. So I started in property in 2019, just before COVID. So I was 20 when I started out. And prior to getting into property, I was a joiner. So working on building sites every day, I just hated what I did, basically. I hated working on building sites. I always used to kind of see like the boss come in his nice car, and I used to think like, I want to be in his situation. I want to be in his position. But at the time, 2019, there weren't half as many kind of like property gurus or courses or things that shows you how to get into property. So I didn't really have like a blueprint of how to get into it. So I quit my joinery job. I finished my apprenticeship. I did probably a year after that, and then I quit. I just decided that, I needed to try and get into property because that's what I wanted to do. And one of my friends sent me like a Facebook post of like a local property investor who was looking for, I think it was like a labourer or something like that at the time. So I dropped him a message on Facebook and I said, like, if you can teach me how to get into property, invest in property, and just generally like get my foot in the door in the industry, then I'll be happy to do like all the work in your properties for free, whether that be labouring, whether it be joinery or, whatever he needs me to do. And he agreed. So then the week later, started working with him, built up kind of like all the foundational knowledge around property. So at the time, the guy who taught me all this stuff I think he was 24, I was 20. He had about 13, 14 properties. So he'd obviously done like really well, for a young age. So I thought he'd be, probably the best person to be learning off, seeing he was, very young as well. And then after about 6 months of working with him, we set up a deal sourcing company, which went really well. So we were primarily dealing with people who are based down south, who wanted to invest in it was mainly like Merseyside and surrounding areas. And we sourced on a few deals. I can't remember the exact number of deals that we sourced on, but then we were also project managing them on the back end. So managed to build up some really good relationships with clients pretty much all around the UK, and then one in particular. And then this is kind of where like my own property investing started. So when I started working with this mentor, if you kind of want to call him that, we put a goal in place. So by the end of 2019, I wanted to buy my first property. At the time, I had like no money, I had no credit history. I was only 20 years old, so I had no idea like how I was going to buy that property by the end of the year. But this property came up, and I'd built quite a good relationship up with the agent, or a few agents in like a local area. So our kind of target area was St. Helens, which is just 20 minutes down the road from Liverpool, pretty much. And they give me a ring and they said, "We got this property coming on the market. Do you want to view it? It's boarded up." So I was like, obviously thinking like this is going to be perfect. And then booked a viewing. Went there the next day, I think. And it was really good. But the problem was, obviously I had no money, so I didn't know how I was actually going to buy that property. So what happened is obviously went back and forth with the guy who I was learning off at the time and who I had a business with, my previous business partner. And I said to him, how can I buy this property, basically, because I couldn't get a mortgage because I didn't have any credit history. I didn't have like a solid track record, but past 6 months of employment either, because I was in the deal sourcing business, and it's kind of like when you first start, it's very up and down. So he basically just came up with an idea to pitch it to some of the investors that we've been working with, and that's basically what I did. Managed to raise the money to buy that house and refurb it, and then obviously flipped it on the back end. And then, just kind of grew from there, really. So, the investment agency came first, and then investing myself second.
Amazing. So just kind of going back to that, transitioning from joinery to obviously working for that guy for free. I mean, a lot of people, I suppose society, if you want to call it that, label Gen Z, millennials, lazy. They're not willing to put the work in. Obviously, you kind of haven't done that. You've done the complete opposite. Do you think that was a mindset that you were kind of like, I know where I want to get to, and although I'm sacrificing now, it's going to hopefully get me to that point? Like, what was your mindset towards doing that?
Yeah, I guess so. I think like everything that I've done in my kind of career so far, I've seen it as like a stepping stone to get to the next stage of life, I guess. Like in school, I didn't do very well. I was always quite entrepreneurial. I used to sell Lucozades in school, sell sweets and all that kind of stuff. So I guess that's probably where it stemmed from. But yeah, I think I always saw everything as a stepping stone to get to that next stage. And then, you kind of, if I have the mindset of like, you never kind of fail, you're always learning. Like if something goes wrong, at least you've learned from it, and you're not going to do it again. You move on to the next and just kind of keep going from there. So yeah, I guess people go different ways. Some people go to university. I decided to get an apprenticeship and kind of just grow from there. And I knew from doing that, I'd have much more opportunity in different avenues, I guess.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, a lot of people that are kind of gone on to be entrepreneurs often are entrepreneurs before they even know they're entrepreneurs, like, selling Lucozade in school. I'm sure at the time you weren't like, I'm going to be the next Richard Branson. You were just like, need to make a bit of money.
Just pocket money, yeah.
Exactly that. So do you think that is something that, I guess, that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, do you think it's something that you were born with? Do you think like it's parent influence? Like where do you think that sort of spark comes from?
Yeah, I guess so. I think, I'm not sure if you're born with it as such, because I think you have to be brought up a certain way. I don't think I was particularly brought up, in an entrepreneurial background. As I say, like when I started, I had no money. So, but my mum, she was a hairdresser. She had her own salon. So, I mean, that's probably as close to entrepreneurial as you can get, really. The rest of my family, they've all been like, working professionals. So yeah, I guess it's probably stemmed from that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, weirdly, my story is pretty much the same as yours.
Okay.
Like my mum's owned a hair salon, or still
Okay.
does, owns a hair salon. I work for people for free to start with. I think, is this like an alternative universe?
Yeah, it could be.
But I mean, it's what, I suppose it's having that initiative to start with, and then going out there and going, right, well, this is what my end result wants to be. How do I get there? And that's obviously, what both you and I have done to get to where we are today. So it's kind of sort of leaning on to the point of like sort of arriving where you are today. How's that sort of journey been so far, in a sense of growing the agency and also your own portfolio at the same time?
It's been quite a long process, really. I mean, from when I started in property, I didn't go kind of like full time straight away. So I've kind of been full time on and off. When I completed on the first flip property, which was in 2019, that's when COVID hit. So literally completed, COVID got announced. All of the material prices went up. All the builders stopped working. Property market basically halted for a little bit. And didn't quite know what I was going to do because everything was so uncertain at the time. And anyway, finished that property. Everything ended up going well, thankfully. Made a good bit of profit. And then I kind of saw a bit of a flaw in what I was doing with the sourcing company. Obviously, I was still very young at the time, and it was going quite well, but I didn't really have all of the resources that I need to be able to scale that business. And I think at the time it was because I didn't know how. So I thought I need to get into some sort of sales role because I had never done anything in sales prior. And I thought I'd be able to build quite a good skill set from getting into sales. So that's what I decided to do. So after I finished that flip, I started my first sales role, which was selling off plan to investors pretty much all over the world. I was an opener when I started, so we was basically cold calling. We used to make like 350 calls a day, and our target was like 2 leads.
Wow.
So you can imagine like how bad them calls were that we were having. Like literally, name would pop up on the screen. You'd say hi Scott, and then you'd pitch them on whatever you're selling. And you'd try and do that 350 times a day, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. And you'd get some good data, you'd get some really, really shit data. But like that resilience, that gave me like a lot of resilience in the fact that, you're getting told to, F off every call you have, and you might have one good one in every hour of the day, maybe. So that was kind of the start of my sales journey, really. And I've always kept it like every role that I've ever done since I started in property. It's all been surrounding property, like the industry. And then I kind of had it in my mind that I wanted to, I don't know why this was, but I kind of wanted to understand like the sales cycle from all perspectives. So I then worked in an estate agent for a little bit. It's kind of weird how everything played out. So when I was at the first company, me and one of my friends, we decided that we wanted to move to Dubai. And I left that company knowing that I was going to go to Dubai, but I wanted to get like a little bit of experience working in an estate agency before I went to Dubai. So I spent 6 months working in an estate agency just to kind of build up a bit of experience, I guess, dealing with sellers, dealing with investors on kind of a different spectrum of, providing them a service. It's more, you're still providing a service, but on the other side of things. So it's just seeing things from the estate agency angle rather than the investor's angle, really. And then, moved to Dubai 6 months later. I spent another 6 months there. Yeah, so I guess it was a less amount of time than I expected that I spent there. But that was an unbelievable experience. Again, building on the sales knowledge, getting yourself into kind of a different culture which was really good. And just being around like-minded people, like winners, it's like the best way I can explain it's kind of like a Wolf of Wall Street vibe. And I think, bringing that back to the UK and into my own business, all the knowledge that I've, built at these previous companies is give me kind of like the foundations that I needed, because I'm like quite an observant person. So it was good to be able to see, what these companies are doing, like the systems and processes that they've got in place, like how they sell, how they scale, and then being able to implement that myself, really.
I think that kind of experience in Dubai. I mean, a lot of people that talk about Dubai, say it's harder to make money in Dubai because it's so competitive there. But if you bring that ethos to the UK, like a lot of people are just sleeping at the wheel at the moment. And
100%.
I think if you can, look past that and put the effort in, like it's so, and people do moan about the UK, but it is so easy to start a business and actually make something of yourself in the UK versus the likes of Dubai and other competitive markets where a lot of entrepreneurial, big, personalities, players are all flooding into these types of markets. But, there's still massive opportunity in the UK, and to use what you've learned there to sort of come over, it makes complete sense. What kind of things did you sort of learn from that sort of scalability perspective then, just kind of lean on that or that remark that you made? What sort of things have you implemented that you sort of learned out in Dubai?
It's kind of like a lot of like sales systems and marketing systems has been the main thing for me, because if I was to go back to like my deal sourcing company from day one, you kind of, if you go on these courses and things like that, you kind of just taught to, find a deal, stack it up in a deal stacking calculator, and then post it in a Facebook group and kind of hope that it sells. But again, with that, it's not a scalable business. And, if that's something that you're looking to do on the side, okay, great, but you're never going to scale and you're never going to make that a proper business for yourself, and you can't predict your income. Like one of the big things for me was like being able to predict revenue and knowing what's going to come in and being able to look at, the numbers side of things. And, when you've got all of these marketing systems in place and you know what your sales system is, like what your closings rate is, how much you've got to spend on marketing and, what avenues are working, what aren't, all that kind of stuff really. And, how to conduct meetings, like stuff like that. You kind of just don't learn unless you work at these companies, or I guess you watch videos or you experience it from working with other people. So all of these things kind of like just really give me a solid foundation to be able to just implement that into my main business and provide, a great service. Like for example, I think a few days ago, I was on the phone to an investor who's based in the Netherlands, and they'd never invested in the UK before, so they wasn't aware of the market. Most deal sources, they might just go back and forth on message or whatever. But one of the things that I learned in sales was like you have to be a little bit more. You have to give more, basically. So what I did is sent like a full presentation of me running through a presentation about how to invest in the UK, where to invest, where the great areas are, and just give her kind of a full in-depth analysis of what she's actually looking to do. So getting her from A to Z is going to be a lot easier. She's going to trust me because she can see my face, and it's no pressure of, trying to get her on a call at a certain time. I can send her that and then try and get her on a call. Whereas, probably going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but again, like, a lot of deal sources, they don't kind of do that sort of stuff. So a lot of the things that I learned there really did help me be able to put the right sales systems in place and put the right marketing systems in place, and to be able to actually predict my revenue for that business.
Just very quickly interrupting this episode, have you got a property deal in mind? Want to build or grow your portfolio but unsure how to obtain funding? No problem. At Roma Finance, they love to lend. The borrower-first approach means Roma deliver flexible, tailored solutions that accommodate the diverse needs and experience of developers across residential, and commercial projects. With a flexible criteria, Roma take time to understand each borrower's unique circumstances. Roma's attentive team are always equipped to handle and take on your requests. They will guide and support you throughout the property journey. Colleagues and customer relations are the beating heart of their business. Don't forget to explore Roma's website, romafinance.co.uk, for helpful resources, including articles and case studies to guide your financial decisions. Remember, Roma Finance love to lend. Your property goals are only a call or email away. Now back to the episode. So what's the time frame from leaving the joinery job to now?
So I think I left that company in 2018.
So it'll be 7 years this year, won't it?
Yeah.
So in that time then, what kind of key lessons have you learned about success? I mean, when I asked that question, like when I was 18, I was like, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 21, next year. Obviously, the more you get on in business, the more you realize actually, particularly in property, it's a long game and it'll eventually come.
Yeah.
But sort of just, I suppose, bearing that piece in mind, and this is, I'm hopefully going to resonate with some of the younger listeners that do listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
What's that process been like for you?
Well, I think when you're starting out, you have all these unrealistic goals, and like some of the goals that you have, because you're so young, they're very stupid and very naive. Like I had a goal, I think when I was 18, I wanted a Range Rover by the time I was 21. And I actually did have a Range Rover by the time I was 21, but it wasn't like a new Range Rover. It was like a very old Range Rover. Like it was banged up. It wasn't banged up, but it was just a very old one. It was, I think, 1998.
Right. Yeah.
Reason I got that was just because we were doing quite a lot of projects at the time, and if you get a van, you need a license for the tips. But if you get a Range Rover with a really long boot, you don't need one.
Nice.
That was literally the only reason why I did that. But no, going back to your question, I think there's just a lot of things that aren't necessary that you have in your mind, but as you kind of go through the journey of entrepreneurship and failing and learning and doing different things, you kind of understand that like none of that shit actually even matters.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't need a Range Rover, you don't need to be a millionaire by a certain age. They're not very realistic. Well, I wouldn't say they're not realistic, but they're just,
it's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's just irrelevant because it's not really like specific business goals. Like where do you want your specific business to be in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? Like it needs to be tied to whatever you're doing rather than just like pie in the sky stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, the biggest thing for me when my mindset shift was kind of, it's not, and I think I've heard the guy that co-owned Gymshark say this, or a roundabout way, but it's not becoming a millionaire, it's who you become in that process to become a millionaire that gets you to that point.
Yeah.
The £1 million is irrelevant. It's who you are. Because, if you lose that £1 million, you're more than likely going to make it back in some capacity because your network, your knowledge, your contacts, your resources, your access to resources, all that sort of stuff. So I think that is definitely part of the business journey. It's maturing and realizing actually what matters in that journey. And it's not the end result, which is money, which typically comes because of the value you provide to the markets anyway. It's about who you become, and your focus changes to that more business perspective, which is obviously what you're sort of alluding to there. So kind of on the sort of investing your own personal stuff onto that sort of piece, what was the first property that you purchased?
So that was a flip deal in St. Helens. So that's kind of been like the main area that I've stuck to over the years. Right. And I think it's mainly just because the person who I was learning from at the time, the guy who I met and, started working for, he had his portfolio in St. Helens, and a lot of the deals that we were sourcing when I started were in St. Helens. So I had really good relationships with agents there, and it just allowed me to understand the market a lot deeper, and specific streets and how well they do and how well they sell and all that kind of stuff. And also I'd get people sending me stuff there, just agents who I'd built up good relationships with. So yeah, it was a flip deal in St. Helens. The purchase price on that was 110. The refurb on it was 20k. I actually went massively over budget on that.
Right.
In hindsight now, if I was to cost that up again, it probably weren't over budget. It was probably more realistic, but I was young, so I think I budgeted for that 12k,
Right.
and I went over by 8 in my mind, but probably didn't. And then the end value was 170. I put it on for 180, ended up reducing it. But I think with that, it's quite interesting that I actually went to the agents who I bought that from, and I said, "What do you think on an end value for this?" And they said about 135 to 140. And I was like, right, okay, like this surely doesn't stack up. And I think that's one of the kind of key takeaways I took from that deal, is that when you look on the market at properties now, like a lot of properties, they don't look like they make sense because you probably don't know the area. And you might look at comparables on that road and see what they've sold for, but it's not necessarily a reflection on what it will actually achieve. Because what I tend to look at is the area's ceiling in particular, not just like the comparables on that road or a certain, distance away from that property. And anyway, I saw these properties like it was in that area in the vicinity that were going between like 170 to I think 190. So I just needed to basically make sure that the property that I was buying was pretty much like for like in terms of quality than they was, and then hopefully I can achieve that, because I think generally like if you're a first time buyer anyway and you're looking to move to an area, I don't think like you've got in your head, oh, I want to live on that specific road. Like you probably just move into the area as a whole. Might get some like that, but not all. So I think you're probably going to be looking at all properties within that area, and if you can get a really nice one, a good quality for a good price, then from the investment point of view, you've probably got a good chance of selling it at that higher range, because kind of getting it to that higher standard and you're making it the best house on that street, I guess.
And how do you fund that project?
So that was the one that was funded from the investor.
Right.
So yeah, just investor finance. So
how did you find that investor in the first place?
So that was through the deal sourcing business. So started deal sourcing first, sold a couple of deals to the investor, built up the relationships. We project managed a few of the refurbs for the investors. They were just like typical BRRs. At the time, they were actually like all money out deals, which obviously you don't really see now. But I think 2 project managed for them. And then just built up that relationship and kept the dialogue going, and just kind of tapped them up when the right deal came, and they obviously had spare funds. So it's kind of just timing really with that. I think, and I guess building a good relationship, a good rapport, and having been successful with their sites and project managing them, and they knew obviously I could carry out this from start to finish just because I had that joinery background, even though I was only young. I guess, they just trusted me.
Yeah. So I suppose property sourcing is a good way to kind of get into property, then invest in yourself, because you kind of, building credibility with an investor if you source them a good project, and then like you find a flip project that you can do together. I suppose I would say
property sourcing is the best way to get into property. The reason being is because no matter what you decide to do, no matter, what strategy you decide to go into in property, it gives you the foundational skills to be able to, do your own stuff eventually in property. Like, for example, stacking deals up, understanding areas, what strategies perform the best, how to stack up different properties for different exits, how to deal with agents, how to deal with investors, how to deal with sellers if you're going direct to vendor. Like all of this stuff will kind of like transpire into your own property business. And if you are just focused on becoming like a full-time investor for yourself, I think being a deal sourcer first definitely gives you all them foundational skills that you'll need to be able to do that. And I think as well, like even if you are a full-time investor, it's one of them things where like, why wouldn't you deal source on the side? Because, what else are you going to be doing every day? If you're actively out looking for deals every day, not all of them are going to stack for you. So, move them onto another investor and actually make money from that. That's kind of the way I've seen things, but then actually making it a proper business as well.
Yeah. What tips would you give to someone that's maybe looking to start property sourcing or starting to get into property?
I think one of the number one tips would be like, definitely don't try to learn from someone who isn't in the business every day. And I think that's the main mistake a lot of people make. And then they go into it thinking like it's really easy. They just have to assess deals and then try and sell them to an investor. And again, like it's just not realistic because, and I'm not trying to call people out here, but a lot of people who teach property sourcing aren't in the day-to-day business. Like they don't run an investment agency or a sourcing company or whatever they want to call it. They just know how to do it because it's one of the lowest barrier to entry strategies. So I think one of the main things is like, just don't learn from someone who isn't doing that every day. And again, like systems and processes is a big one. Sales is huge in a property sourcing company. Like most of the successful people I know in this niche, in this industry, in property sourcing, they've all been in some sort of role prior where they've, either been around salespeople or they've done it themselves. So they've been able to build up that kind of knowledge and kind of the process of how to do things and how to communicate and how to do all that sort of stuff. And thirdly, I would say personal branding's massive because over the past few years, I've kind of operated under my personal brand as a business, really. I've not really operated under a business brand. It's all just been me. And I've seen a lot of success with that because I think, like, in my opinion, like people obviously people buy from people, like it's one of them sayings, but I think no one actually does care about your business. They care about like you, whoever's providing them the service. Like if I go to a massive company now and ask for something, like I want to know who it is who's actually providing me with that service, and I don't want to be like passed around to like 3 different people saying like they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And that's what a lot of these big companies do. But I just think, you're more inclined to see success by doing that. And maybe you have, a business brand as well, but operating under your personal brand, in my opinion, is definitely a good way to start.
How are you sort of marketing yourself then? What are you just posting? I'm a property sourcer, or what type of content are you sort of putting out there?
Something else that I've just thought of actually, another tip that I would give is don't call yourself a property sourcer. And one of the main reasons for this is because property sourcers are kind of, what's the word? Property sources are
not hard to come by.
Well, they're not hard to come by. Yeah. Like if you go on Facebook and you look into a property group, you'll see, hundreds, if not thousands of property sources. But they are very like frowned upon in the industry.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been building up over the years. And the reason why that's been building up is because, again, like these free courses, and maybe they're not even free, maybe they're paid, but they're learning from people who aren't doing it every day. So then that transpires into the day-to-day business of these people and what they're doing, they're not learning good practice stuff because they're learning from people who aren't doing it.
Yeah.
They're learning from people who are just thinking how you actually do it.
I think just to quickly add to that, as an active investor, when I'm going to an event and doing the networking and what have you, and I say this from not an arrogant perspective or anything like that, but when you kind of get the census of someone new to property, and then they say that they're a property sourcer, I think it's not necessarily that. I think it's the credibility piece that comes with that, because I already feel like I know more than this individual.
Yeah.
And that's not because, I think I'm better than this person. It's because I've been in the industry for nearly or over a decade.
Yeah.
And I doubt very much they've been in that for that amount of time. So I think it's so hard to get that instant credibility if you say, I'm a property sourcer. So what can people kind of do to avoid that?
So one of the things I do, and again, like, you need to look, if you are a property sourcer, you're probably an individual, right? So you might not be a company yet. You might be a company, but you might not be kind of like a company with staff. You might not have a fully running business. You might just be an individual, and that's fine. But you need to look at all of these huge companies who are selling property in the world. Like, you don't see them saying property sourcer. You might be like a property consultant, you might be a property investment specialist, and it's just a lot more professional and you come off a lot better to people. And like, for example, like if I give my title to anyone for my investment agency, I always say, like, I'm a property investment specialist because I know what I'm talking about and I know what I'm saying. Whereas like sometimes property sources, they don't know what they're saying and what they're talking about, and that's why they get frowned upon, because they send a deal, you ask them questions and they don't know, and again transcribes to the the free courses and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think just have more of a professional front to your business and to your personal brand than, hi, my name's whatever and I'm a property sourcer, because you're not going to get much credibility from that.
No, I agree. So kind of jumping back to the social media question then, what sort of thing are you doing to not come across as a property sourcer, but more so as an investment specialist?
Well, I think on social media, I think for me, like, I don't actively represent myself as a property sourcer with anything I post, especially on Instagram. I just show people, case studies of what I'm doing, and I guess success stories from clients, testimonials from clients. You can look on LinkedIn, for example, and you can see like some of the caliber of like clients who I've worked with, and I think just showing them sort of things rather than just, I don't know, like really bullshitty posts. And I think as well, like, social media for a lot of sources just kind of is posting in Facebook groups, nothing else, and just kind of like face the camera posts, like trying to educate people. But I just don't think that works these days.
How, just kind of, let's say you were stripped of all your sort of client book, stripped of all your pipeline, you were starting again.
Yeah.
You have very little experience. What would your approach be to sort of your social media marketing, growing your personal brand, growing your client? Like, what would that approach look like?
Well, I think number one, you obviously need to be educated on what you're selling. So that's number one for me, is like, know your product before you even speak to any clients, because you don't want to get on the phone and start mumbling your words, and you're just going to end up failing.
And you do that, I assume, by being taught in the right environment.
Yeah. So obviously, if you have to get a mentor and you have to pay for it, then actually speak to someone who's doing it every day and they're running a successful business.
Or work in the industry, estate agency, Dubai,
Yeah, exactly. Or work in the industry, work for a company who's selling property, whether that's being a consultant, whether that's being an estate agent, or just kind of surrounding yourself within the industry and seeing what people are doing and listening and being observant. I think that's really important. And again, like that's on the sales process side. So like on the property side, you know, you need to understand how to, I guess, stack a deal, look at deals, you know, and understand what to do with them, the exits and all that kind of stuff. So again, just learn from someone who is actually doing it every day, not the wrong people. But in terms of what I think I would do is, again, I would get educated first on, you know, how to actually look at property, how to get into it, and how to stack up a deal and understand what the product is that I'm selling. And then when I know what I'm doing, and when I know that I can find these deals, and when I know, you know, that everything's watertight with the product, that's when I would then go to the market and just jump on the phones. And, you know, the only way you can do that is just literally by outreach to people. You know, if you do really know your product inside out, you can look at alternative methods like paid ads, and actually running and acting as a proper business. But yeah, paid outreach is one, getting people on the phone, buying data, calling through data, and just, you know, making as many phone calls as you can. And, you know, that's really one of the only ways that you're going to progress, is just speaking to as many people as you can and telling as many people about your business as you can. Because I think what a lot of people don't do is put themselves out there enough on social media, and I probably don't either. But I think, you know, I was thinking in my head, like, how many people do I know? How many people can I tell about my business? But then, like, how many people are actually in the world? Like, it's crazy. And social media, you know, you're literally paying for attention. So it's just like, just put yourself out there. If you need to, you know, pay for attention at some point, once you know what you're doing, then you can do that. But you just need to be at the right stage before you know, choose to do anything like that.
I suppose all this kind of insight people can get if they join the property club.
Yeah. So this is, you know, a topic that we're quite heavy on inside our members club. We've got a lot of guys as well within the club who are running very successful businesses, you know, deal sourcing, investment agencies, whatever they want to call it. And, you know, a lot of them are scaling like 6-7 figures. One company in particular, like, they're doing like 6 figures every month.
Wow.
You know, crazy. But it's just doing things the right way. And obviously they've got a lot of staff to be able to do that. It's not just a one-man band. So it, you know, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But yeah, something that we cover quite heavily inside the club. We're also running a mastermind in February, which we have currently 3 guest speakers on, which is in Liverpool City Centre, really good venue. And, you know, all of the people who are there are 6 to 7 figure investment agency owners. And, you know, people are going to learn a lot from people like that. So it's just getting yourself in the room with the right people.
For sure. So to round the episode off quite nicely then, how can people find out more about the property club and obviously follow you if they're looking to do that?
Yeah, so drop me a follow on Instagram, Property Jordan. You'll also see Property Club UK on Instagram as well. And again, we've just opened the doors for new 2025 members. So we have a couple of intakes every year. We don't want to overload with so many people. So yeah, if you're interested and you want to get more information, then yeah, just drop us a follow and you'll see everything from there.
Amazing. Great stuff. Appreciate you coming on today.
Cheers, Scott.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Of course, as I always say after every episode, please do like and subscribe on YouTube. The channel is growing quite nicely at the moment, so keep that momentum going. I appreciate all the viewers that do stick around to see the end. Not many usually do, but I do appreciate it. And obviously, if you're listening to the audio version, please do leave a review. It helps the podcast. Hopefully, you've had some good insights from Jordan today, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.